Michael Anderson stopped in the hallway, his briefcase slipping from his hand because the sound coming from his son's room made his body freeze. It was laughter. Soft, real laughter. The kind that had not lived in this house for a very long time. For months, the mansion had been quiet, heavy, filled with machines, doctors' voices, and silence. But now, behind that half-open door, his 5-year-old son was laughing like a child who had no pain at all. Michael took a slow step closer, afraid that if he moved too fast, the sound would disappear. His chest felt tight, not from joy, but from fear. He had paid the best doctors in the country. He had followed every rule, every instruction. Yet, his son had only grown sadder. And now, without warning, something was happening when he was not supposed to be home. When he looked through the door, what he saw made his breath leave him. On the floor beside his son was the black maid, Grace Turner, her hands on Ethan's weak legs, moving them with care and purpose. Ethan was smiling at her, trusting her, trying to lift his leg as she whispered words that sounded like hope. In that moment, Michael knew something was very wrong, or very powerful. And whatever it was happening in his house, to his child, without his permission. Michael stood there, unable to move, his eyes fixed on the small scene unfolding before him. Grace did not notice him. She was fully focused on Ethan, as if the rest of the world did not exist. She spoke to him in a calm voice, slow and steady, like someone who had done this many times before. "Easy now, Ethan," she said softly. "You do not need to rush. Just try. I am right here." Ethan's small face was tight with effort, his little hands gripping the edge of the bed. His legs shook as he tried to lift it, and then, just a little, it moved. Not much, but enough to matter. Grace smiled wide and clapped her hands gently. "You did it," she said. "Did you feel that? You did it by yourself." Ethan laughed again, a sound so full that it hurt Michael's chest. When was the last time he had heard that sound? He could not remember. His son had cried so much these past months, cried in pain, cried in frustration, cried when he thought no one was listening. Anger rose inside Michael, sharp and fast. Who did this woman think she was, touching his son like that, making decisions without asking him? He had rules in this house, clear rules. Doctors came with papers and reports, not aprons and cleaning gloves. Yet even as the anger grew, doubt followed close behind. Ethan had not moved like that in months. The expensive therapists had spoken in long words and cold voices, but Ethan never smiled with them, never laughed. Michael pulled back from the door quietly and leaned against the wall. His hands were shaking. He felt like a stranger in his own home, like something important was happening without him. A soft voice came from behind him. "You came home early." Michael turned and saw his wife, Laura, standing there with a cup of tea in her hands. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were gentle. She glanced toward Ethan's room, and a small smile touched her lips when she heard the laughter. "You hear it too," she said softly. Michael swallowed hard. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. Laura hesitated. "A while," she admitted. "I did not plan it, Michael, but I saw Ethan smiling again, and I did not want to stop it." Michael felt something heavy settle in his stomach. "You let her do this," he said, his voice low. "I let Ethan be happy," Laura replied quietly. Before Michael could answer, the laughter in the room faded, replaced by soft talking. Grace helped Ethan sit on the bed. The boy wrapped his arms around her neck and hugged her tight. "Thank you, Aunt Grace," Ethan said, his voice small but proud. "Tomorrow I will lift both legs, you will see." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. His son had not called anyone aunt or uncle since he was a baby. When had Grace become this important to him? That night, Michael barely slept. The image of Grace on the floor with Ethan replayed again and again in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his son's smile, and it filled him with equal parts hope and fear. What if this woman was giving him false hope? What if she hurt him? The next morning, Michael watched the house like a man waiting for a storm. He sat in his office, but did no work. His thoughts stayed in Ethan's room. When Grace entered the kitchen to prepare breakfast, Michael felt his body stiffen. She moved quietly, her head lowered, as always. To anyone else, she looked like just a maid doing her job. But now Michael saw her differently. There was something calm about her, something strong. "Grace," he said suddenly. She turned, surprise flashing across her face. "Yes, sir. We need to talk," Michael said. Grace nodded, her hands tightening around the knife she was holding. "Of course, sir." Michael took a breath. "About what I saw yesterday." Grace went still. For a moment, the kitchen felt very small. "I can explain," she said softly. Michael's voice hardened. "Explain why you think you can act like a doctor with my son without asking me." Grace lowered her eyes. "I never meant to disrespect you, sir." "Then, why did you do it?" Michael asked. Grace hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Because he was hurting," she said, "and because no one was really listening to him." Michael felt his jaw tighten. "You are a maid," he said, the words coming out sharper than he intended. "You clean my house. That is all." Grace flinched, but she did not look away. There was something steady in her eyes now. "I know what I am," she said, "but I also know what your son needs." Before Michael could answer, small footsteps echoed in the hall. Ethan appeared, walking with his crutches, his face bright. "Daddy," he said happily, "can I show you what Aunt Grace taught me?" Michael looked at his son, then at Grace. His heart felt pulled in two directions. He did not know which side to trust. But one thing was clear. Whatever Grace was doing, it was changing his son. And Michael knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning of something that would shake his life apart. That evening, Michael Anderson sat alone in his study, long after the house had gone quiet. The lights were off, except for the small lamp on his desk. He did not turn on the main lights. He did not want brightness. His mind was heavy, and brightness felt wrong. The sound of Ethan's voice from earlier kept returning, clear and strong. "Daddy, can I show you what Aunt Grace taught me?" Michael pressed his fingers together, resting his elbows on the desk. He had told himself for years that money could fix anything, that the right doctors, the right equipment, the right plans would save his son. Yet the truth sat in front of him now, uncomfortable and hard to face. A maid, a woman he barely noticed, had reached his son in a way he never had. He remembered the way Grace looked at Ethan, not like a problem to be solved, but like a child worth believing in. That thought made his chest tighten. When had he stopped looking at his own son that way? The next morning came slowly. Michael woke before his alarm, his body already tense. He did not rush to work like usual. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house wake up. Somewhere down the hall, he heard soft movement, then Ethan's voice, low and careful, followed by Grace's calm reply. Michael stood quietly and moved toward the hallway. He did not want to be seen. He did not even know why he was doing this. He told himself he was being careful, that he was protecting his son. But deep inside, another feeling guided him, curiosity mixed with fear. He stopped near Ethan's door, not close enough to look inside, just close enough to hear. "Slowly," Grace said. "No need to hurry. Your body needs time." "I am trying," Ethan replied, his voice strained. "I know you are," Grace said. "Trying is already winning." Michael closed his eyes. No doctor had ever spoken to his son like that. Doctors spoke about muscles and limits, about expectations and charts. Grace spoke about effort, about belief. Breakfast passed in silence. Laura watched Michael closely, but said nothing. Ethan ate more than usual, his face brighter, his posture straighter. Grace moved around the kitchen, quiet as always, but Michael noticed how often Ethan looked toward her, as if making sure she was still there. After breakfast, Michael did something unexpected. He stayed home. He told his assistant he would work remotely, then closed his laptop without opening it. Instead, he walked through the house, pretending to read messages on his phone while watching Grace and Ethan from a distance. Mid-morning, Grace took Ethan to the living room. She laid a soft rug on the floor and placed pillows around it. To anyone else, it looked like a child's play area. Michael knew better now. "Stand here," Grace said gently, placing Ethan between two cushions. Ethan held onto the couch, his legs shaking. Grace stayed close but did not touch him right away. "You remember what we talked about," she said. "Your legs listen to you. Talk to them." Ethan nodded, his face serious. He took a breath and shifted his weight. His knee bent slightly, then straightened again. It was small, but it was real. Michael felt his throat tighten. He had paid thousands of dollars to see movements smaller than this, movements that never came. Grace smiled but did not clap this time. "Good," she said. "Rest now. You did enough. Enough. Not too much. Not forced." Michael realized that the therapist had always pushed Ethan until he cried, then called it progress. Later that day, Michael noticed something else. Grace arrived early, much earlier than her shift required. She came in quietly, set her bag down, and went straight to Ethan's room to prepare. Michael checked the time. She was not being paid for this. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. Grace stayed late. She came on her days off. She kept notes in a small, worn notebook, writing carefully after each session. Michael's confusion deepened. No one did this without a reason. On Friday night, as the house settled into silence, Michael made a decision that surprised even him. He opened the security system on his tablet and added new camera views, focusing on the common areas and Ethan's therapy space. He told himself it was for safety, but the truth was harder to admit. Over the next days, he watched the recordings in secret. What he saw unsettled him. Grace spoke to Ethan with patience that never faded. When Ethan failed, she did not sigh or correct him harshly. She waited. When he succeeded, she did not exaggerate. She simply acknowledged it, like progress was normal, expected. She used simple objects: rolled towels, rubber bands, water bottles filled with sand. She adapted, adjusted, tried again. Michael compared her notes to the reports from professional therapists. Hers were clearer, more detailed, more personal. One evening, Laura found Michael staring at the screen. "You see it too," she said quietly. "Yes," Michael replied, his voice low. "And I do not understand it." Laura sat beside him. "Maybe you do," she said. "You are just afraid of what it means." That night, Michael followed Grace. She left the house after dinner, carrying a plain bag. Michael waited, then took his car and followed at a distance. Grace took 2 buses into a part of the city Michael had never visited. The streets were narrow, the houses close together. She entered a small, worn home. Michael waited. After some time, the door opened again, and a teenage boy stepped out with her. The boy walked with a slight limp, but his steps were confident. They went to a nearby field where other children were playing. The boy joined a soccer game. Michael watched in disbelief. The boy ran, turned, kicked, laughed. He was strong. Grace stood at the side, her face calm, proud. Michael understood then. This was not chance. This was experience. As he drove home that night, one thought repeated in his mind. Grace was not just helping Ethan. She was reliving something, fighting a battle she had already fought once before. And Michael knew, whatever truth he was about to uncover, It would change everything he thought he knew about her, and about himself. Michael Anderson did not sleep well that night. His body rested, but his mind refused to slow down. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the teenage boy running across the field, strong legs moving freely, laughter clear and full. That boy was proof. Proof that what Grace was doing was not luck, not imagination, not a moment that would fade. It was real. By morning, Michael knew he could not stay silent anymore. Watching from a distance was no longer enough. He needed answers, not to accuse, but to understand. Grace was in the kitchen when he entered, washing dishes, her movements calm and steady. She greeted him the same way she always did, with respect and a quiet voice. "Good morning, sir." Michael studied her face. She looked tired, but not weak. There was a quiet strength in the way she stood, like someone who had learned long ago how to carry heavy things without complaining. "Grace," Michael said, "we need to talk." She paused, then turned off the tap and dried her hands slowly. "Yes, sir." "Not here," he said. "Come with me." They sat in the small sitting room near the garden, a place rarely used. Sunlight came through the window, soft and warm. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I followed you," Michael said finally. Grace did not pretend not to understand. She lowered her eyes. "I know. I saw the boy," Michael continued. "Your brother." Grace took a deep breath. "His name is Marcus. He runs," Michael said. "He plays soccer." "Yes," Grace replied quietly. "He does." Michael leaned forward. "You said doctors told him he would not walk properly." "They did," Grace said. "They said many things." "How?" Michael asked. "How did you do it?" Grace was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was pain beneath it. "I did not have a choice," she said. "My parents worked all the time. We had no money, no connections. Marcus cried every night because he wanted to run like other boys. I watched him break inside, little by little. I could not let that happen." "So you taught yourself," Michael said. "Yes," Grace replied. "I watched therapists when we could afford visits. I read books. I watched videos. I practiced every day. I failed many times. Marcus fell many times, but I never stopped believing in him." Michael felt a strange tightness in his chest. "And you see Marcus in Ethan," he said. Grace nodded. "I see the same fear, the same sadness, and I see the same strength." Michael looked down. "You should have told me." "Yes," Grace agreed softly. "But would you have listened?" The question stayed between them, heavy and honest. That afternoon, something happened that no one expected. Ethan walked into the room without his crutches. His steps were slow and careful, his body tense with effort, but he was walking. Grace stood up instantly, ready to help, but Ethan lifted his hand. "I can do it," he said. Michael stood frozen. His son walked toward him, each step small, but firm. When Ethan reached him, he smiled, proud and bright. "Daddy," he said, "I did it." Michael knelt down and held his son, his hands shaking. Tears fell without him trying to stop them. For the first time, he felt the strength in Ethan's legs. Not fragile, not hopeless, just growing. "I am sorry," Michael whispered. "I am so sorry." Grace watched from a distance, her eyes wet, but her face peaceful. She began to step back, giving father and son their moment. "Grace," Michael said, looking up, "please stay." She hesitated, then nodded. That evening, Michael asked Grace a question he had avoided for days. "Do you have training?" he asked. "Real training?" Grace took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "I studied physical therapy at a state university. I finished 3 years ago." Michael stared at her. "Then why are you here?" "Cleaning my house." Grace's voice was steady, but her words were heavy. "Because no one hired me. I sent applications everywhere. Clinics, hospitals, centers. They all wanted experience, but no one wanted to give me a chance. I needed work, and this was what I found. Michael felt shame settle deep inside him. He thought of all the people he had hired based on names, schools, recommendations, never once thinking about who was being left out. That night, Michael made a decision. The next morning, he called a meeting. Laura was there. Grace was there, and Ethan sat quietly, listening. "Grace," Michael said, "from today, you are no longer working as a maid in this house." Grace's face fell. "Sir, I understand if you want me to leave." "No," Michael said quickly. "That is not what I mean." He took a breath. "I want you to work here as Ethan's physical therapist, officially, with proper pay, and full authority over his care." Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan said softly, smiling. Michael continued. "And that is not all. I know about the community center." Grace froze. "I followed you again," Michael said gently. "I saw the children. I saw what you do at night." Grace's shoulders shook. "I did not want you to think I was using your house for something else." "I think," Michael said, "that you are doing what many people should have done long ago." Within weeks, everything began to change. Michael funded the renovation of the community center. New equipment arrived. Other therapists were hired. Grace was placed in charge. At home, Michael worked less. He sat on the floor with Ethan. He laughed with him. He listened. For the first time, the house felt alive. But even as hope grew, Michael knew something important remained. This was not just about fixing what was broken. It was about facing the truth of who he had been and choosing who he wanted to become. And that final choice, he knew, would define the rest of his life. 3 months passed, and the Anderson house no longer felt like the quiet place it once was. The walls that had held silence now carried voices, light steps, and small moments of joy. Michael Anderson noticed these changes not because someone told him, but because he was finally present enough to feel them. Every afternoon, Michael left work early. At first, it felt strange, like he was breaking a rule he had followed his whole life. But soon, those afternoons became the most important part of his day. He sat on the living room floor with Ethan, helping him stretch, counting slowly as Grace guided them both. 1. "Hold it," Grace said calmly. 2. "Breathe." 3. "Relax." Ethan followed her voice with trust. His legs were stronger now. Not perfect, but real in a way Michael could see and touch. When Ethan fell, Grace did not rush. She waited, watched, and spoke softly. "You fell," she said. "That is okay. Falling means you tried." Michael learned to stay calm too. He learned not to rush, not to panic, not to expect miracles overnight. Grace taught him that healing was not about speed. It was about patience. At the community center, change came fast, but it did not feel rushed. New mats were laid on the floor. Simple machines replaced broken ones. Children arrived every day. Some carried in by tired parents, some holding onto walls, some afraid to try. Grace greeted every child the same way, by kneeling down to their level and looking them in the eye. "You are safe here," she told them, "and we will move at your pace." Michael watched her work often, standing quietly at the back of the room. He saw children take their first steps, not perfect steps, but proud ones. He saw parents cry, not from sadness, but from relief. One evening, after the last child had gone home, Michael stood beside Grace in the empty room. "You changed all of this," he said. Grace shook her head gently. "I just helped," she replied. "The children did the work." Michael smiled, understanding now that this was who she was. Not someone seeking praise, but someone who believed in others more than herself. At home, Laura changed too. She spent time at the center, helping organize supplies, talking with parents, listening. The distance that once lived between her and Michael slowly faded. They spoke more, laughed more, shared worries instead of hiding them. Ethan changed the most. He no longer walked with fear. He still had days where his legs felt weak, days where he needed rest. But he no longer saw himself as broken. He saw himself as learning. One afternoon, Ethan came home from school with a paper in his hand. "Daddy," he said, "I want to talk in front of my class." Michael felt his chest tighten. "About what?" he asked. "About me," Ethan replied, "and about Grace." The day of the school presentation arrived quietly. Michael and Laura sat in the small audience, their hands clasped together. Grace sat a few rows behind them, unsure if she should even be there. Ethan walked onto the small stage without help. His steps were slow but steady. The room was silent. "My name is Ethan Anderson," he began, his voice clear. "And I want to tell you something important." He spoke simply. About falling. About feeling different. About being sad when he thought no one understood him. He spoke about Grace. About how she taught him to try again and again. "She told me I was strong," Ethan said, "even when I did not believe it." Michael felt tears run down his face. He did not wipe them away. After the applause, Ethan walked straight to Grace and hugged her tight. That evening, Michael asked Grace to join them in the living room. He held an envelope in his hands. "This is not a gift," he said. "It is something you earned." Grace opened the envelope slowly. Inside was an official letter offering her a full specialization program in pediatric physical therapy, fully funded. There was also a document naming her a partner in the newly renamed Grace and Marcus Children's Therapy Institute. Grace covered her mouth, her body shaking. "I cannot take this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Michael said gently, "and you should." Marcus stood near the door, watching his sister. He stepped forward and hugged her. "You always told me to believe," he said. "Now, it is your turn." 2 years later, the Institute became known across the country. Families traveled long distances to seek help. Grace completed her studies with honor. Her methods, simple, patient, full of care, changed how people saw healing. Ethan, now 8 years old, became the Institute's youngest helper. He welcomed children, showed them exercises, and told them his story. He ran, he played, he lived. Michael learned the hardest lesson of his life: that worth is not found in titles or money, but in love, patience, and the courage to see people for who they truly are. Grace entered his home as a maid. She left a mark as family, and the house that once held silence now held life, proof that sometimes the greatest miracles come through the hands we almost ignore. Dear viewers, this story is not just about a wealthy man, a maid, or a child learning to walk. It is about the quiet power of love, patience, and belief. It reminds us that sometimes the people we overlook carry the greatest gifts, and the hands we ignore can be the ones that heal, teach, and change lives forever. Through Grace and Ethan, we see that progress does not always come from money or titles, but from care, time, and a heart that refuses to give up. This story shows us that true strength is not loud. It is gentle, steady, and full of hope. And sometimes, all a child, or even an adult, needs is someone who truly believes in them. We would love to hear from you. Please tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and share what you learned from this story. Your words might touch someone else who needs hope today. If this story moved your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs encouragement. And if you want more emotional and inspiring stories from us, comment "more stories," and you will be the first to receive the next powerful story we share. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your support helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most.